Hello everyone and welcome to the Conversations podcast with Tania Kindersley and Kathy Price. Tania is a writer, writing coach and mentor and a horsewoman. She lives in Scotland with her 2 thoroughbreds and her 2 lurchers. Kathy lives on the family farm in the hills of Mid Wales, and her work Point of Balance is all about helping people and animals heal themselves.
It's always good to start with a laugh, isn't it? The reason lovely listeners, our lovely podcast listeners, I'm laughing because Kathy was doing a silent countdown. And obviously we haven't quite got our professionalism going yet. But we just decided this very minute that we're going to call this conversation. And I love that idea because I love the idea of people just roaming freely over any subject that takes their fancy, rather than so much of, I don't know, interviews or even some podcasts that they're very structured, aren't they? They're very, we've got to hit that one subject, we've got to publicize the movie, we've got to talk about our latest book. And every so often you come across somebody and they're just having a really good conversation. And you think, and especially during lockdown, because we haven't been able to have those many good conversations in real life, not face to face anyway. You and I have a few on the telephone.
We certainly do. I have to say that we might start on a certain subject, but Tania and I have a bit of a track record from going from celery soup to quantum physics all in one conversation. So yes, viewer beware. You never know where this is going to end up.
I always feel we failed if we haven't got in soup and quantum physics.
Yes, and about 5 other subjects in between.
But what we were talking about the other day, which is what we wanted to start with here, is the idea of connection. And I've been thinking a little bit about this since we spoke about it on the telephone, and I suddenly thought, it's got so many different meanings. I mean, so many, and not only so many different meanings, but each person will give it a slightly different emphasis, a slightly different angle, a slightly different association. But also I fear it may be one of those words that's in danger of getting a bit annoying, a little bit, in the kind of, look, Instagram, we're all about connection. And I can't believe I'm starting our first podcast by using the mocking voice when, because we're supposed to be no judgment. But there is something about those connection people, that I find them a little bit difficult, the shiny people on Instagram who appear to have the perfect lives. Indeed. And they're very connected, aren't they? So it's all about connection. So I'm a little bit worried about that. But for years and years I refused to get a 4x4 because I didn't like that certain type of person who drove around London. This is when I lived in London, in a 4x4. So when I moved to the country and I actually needed something that would go across a ploughed field and take a bale of hay in it, I wouldn't get one of those cars because I thought,
in spite of yourself,
because those people had one. So I think let's do that with connection, even though there are maybe a few little everything's perfect people using it. So that's what my friend Terence, the man of letters, would call throat clearing.
Okay.
The thing I really thought about it was I thought that it's the answer to everything. So it may be a little bit confusing because it's got so many meanings and so many undertones.
Yes, undertones, yeah.
Undertones, under subtexts, and so many connections, so many associations for so many different people. The minute I started thinking about it, I thought, well, that's the key to everything. And I thought about what E.M. Forster wrote, which was, the famous Only Connect, and people have it on tote bags and posters and t-shirts.
Straight over my head. Over my head.
It's from a really interesting and in a way quite difficult novel called Howard's End. And the reason the novel is quite difficult is that all the characters are slightly unlikable. They're a little bit prissy, or a little bit spiky, or a little bit too idealistic, or a little bit not emotionally intelligent enough. And one of the characters has the chance of growing into herself, but we're not quite sure whether she's going to make it. We're not quite sure whether she's just going to go back into convention and be a little bit confined and a little bit proper, or whether she's going to
express herself.
Express herself. And there's this moment where he goes, only connect. And it's something like that was the burden of her song. And it was connect the prose and the passion, and you will live in fragments no longer.
Oof, deep.
Yeah. So what people take from that is they just hear the only connect bit. And as I say, it goes on t-shirts and tote bags and all over Instagram. And people take it to mean, you know, just connect with another person, ring someone else up, be in love, you know, talk to your best friend on a podcast. But actually what Forster was saying was something much more subtle. He said only connect the prose and the passion. What he meant by the prose was the practical, conventional, sensible, presentable self. And the passion is the wild, messy, sod the conventions, sod
the other side of everything.
Yeah. And his belief, and I think this is very Jungian, is that actually if you could connect those two inside yourself, because we do need a little bit of a sensible self, and we do need a little bit of a conventional self so we don't frighten the horses.
Yes, and operate in the world.
Yes. You know, those artists who just do anything, they're kind of what my cousin would call amusing once. You know, it gets too much quite quickly.
I love that.
This is the bourgeois streak from my mum talking in me. But we have to live in the world, don't we? We have to live in community. So you need a little bit of the prose. But then if you don't have the passion, which is the things you love, the crazy things that drive you to leave your comfort zone, the things that make you step into your creative self, then you're really living half a life. And that's what he was talking about. He wasn't talking about that connection between humans. He was talking about connecting the two different... In
yourself.
Yes.
The two sides of you.
So that is my opening.
Wow. As they say, follow that. I'm going to say very quickly, you won't be getting any quotes from me, okay? I can barely remember titles of books, let alone sentences. And I think that's really an interesting way to start, because in essence, it's where I come from. My work is all about, as far as I'm concerned, energy and connection. And the connection part for me is that we are connected to everything. And that's the connection of the inside to the outside to the rest of creation, if you like. I mean, I'm going big scale here. We're not talking telephones here and Instagram. We're talking the universe. But for me, I love what you said there, because in essence, it is, from my perspective, it's when we find our passion and who we really are and accept that. And as you said, we've got to operate in the normal world, inverted commas, normal, whatever that is, but we've got to operate in the world. It's so difficult to put it into words, but I think we get stuffed full of so much, I'm going to say the word shit, from outside. Apologies. You know, we listen to the news, it's all negativity. People tell us, you know, no judgment. We try and work from, we sometimes manage to do it, but it's, you know, we're fed everybody else's ideas and everybody else's fears. When you switch the TV on, it's all about that. For me, what that does is it fills us up with somebody else's energy, with somebody else's thought, so that when we want to connect to ourselves, we can't. because all of this stuff is already in there. And it not only stops us connecting to ourselves, it stops us connecting to the world, because we can't reverberate, we can't vibrate at who we really are, because you know I'm all about energy and vibration, and that's what we are at the base level. And so what you said there is perfect, because it's talking about the prose and it's talking about the passion. And for me, the passion is what drives us. If we could sit down and say, that's the perfect life for me, that's what I want to do, that would be your passion. And that, to me, I mean, I'm very lucky that I've stepped into this place where I am doing my passion. My passion is my work. And the freedom it gives you to push everything else aside, or not let it fill you up, because the vibration in you is so strong and that connection out is so strong, you can actually be yourself. So I just love that. That was a fabulous way of starting the whole conversation for me. As you said, there's so many nuances to it, but for me, the connection, we are connected to everything. And we can't deny it. Every breath we take, the oxygen molecules have probably been processed by a tree or something.
Or Alexander the Great.
Or Alexander the Great, absolutely.
We are breathing in. Is it molecules that Alexander the Great breathed out? And that's actual science.
Yes, yes, yes.
I mean, how mad is that?
They might have gone through a few trees in the process, but
and they've gone through trees.
Yes, I know. But that's connection, you see, that's connection to what was and what is and what will be. It's not just this moment as well. I know the present is very important, but it's a much bigger picture.
Also, what I think is fascinating, you know, when those things come out and it says we humans share, what is it, 79% of our DNA with yeast.
Oh, right. I hadn't even heard that one. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure
I'll be a loaf of bread.
I know I've got the percentage wrong, but I mean, what are we with chimpanzees? 98. Sorry. Steady on.
I'm drinking water, yes.
What, 98% DNA?
Not sure. I'm not going to say.
I mean, it's huge. It's absolutely huge. So that, you know, the idea of people using monkey as an insult, and so that's another form of connection, isn't it? But the reason I said yeast is that one always amazes me, because to me that's an inanimate object. You know,
really? Yeah.
I mean, I know it makes bread move and rise and live, but it's a lump of stuff. And yet we share a lot of its DNA. You know, we share DNA with sunflowers, so when you say everything is connected, it's not just this extraordinary thing of the breathing in of the molecules that were breathed out by Catherine the Great, but Peter the Great, Alexander, anyone called Great, really.
Yeah. We've got their molecules.
You know, a 12th century crofter in Orkney, whose name we will never know.
Yeah.
But we are connected in the very building blocks of our physical being to every living thing. And then, of course, the thing, and you know, I go on about this the whole time, but the other massive connection, and I don't know this part of it like you do. I come to this not from the area of science, but from the area of story, because I think story is another thing that connects us all. So I see these extraordinary facts through the eye of the novelist, through the eye of the storyteller, because to me that's an extraordinary story, that human beings are related to yeast. I mean, that's an insane story. And I think that, you know, my big story is that we are all made of the atoms of exploded stars.
I know, it's just so beautiful.
It's so beautiful. And even as I say it now, I can actually feel my body almost tingle.
Yes.
Yeah, there's a little stardust in there, just a little bit.
All of it. Yes.
And I've known that fact for a really long time. I'm not big on the sciences, as you know. I had to give them up when I was quite young, but I always kept an ear out for a bit of dear old theoretical physics, because I quite liked all those crazy string theorists. And here's another extraordinary story: is why is it that the macro and the micro don't agree? I mean, that's a story, which is we're all connected. We're all made of stardust. You know, everything that is in the universe came out of this singularity, which nobody can quite explain.
Yeah.
So everything is literally made of the same
stuff.
And yet, whoa, just in case we were getting a little bit too, I don't know, fuzzy and warm with that story, that we're all connected, suddenly, whoa, massive disconnect, which is the laws of the very, very small and the laws of the very, very big don't agree with each other.
It's an interesting fact. There's two things you said there that I love the way you connected us to yeast. And then you said, but it's a lump of stuff. And I thought, yeah, somebody might actually call me a lump of stuff, but there we go. But also the other thing is, what I love is that yeast becomes not a lump of stuff when it's given the right conditions.
Yeah.
And that's what I love. I just love that, because that's what happens with us, that if we are given the right conditions where we can blossom and connect and reach the parts that other beers cannot reach, then we start bubbling up and blossoming and expanding out. So I just love that. That was so cool.
It's a perfect metaphor, because also not only does it need the right conditions.
Yeah.
So, you know, I always talk about how important context is. We can't divorce ourselves from our context.
Mm-hmm.
You know, a text doesn't exist without a context. I learned this when I was teaching Shakespeare to young kids. I had to explain to them what Elizabethan England was like.
It's all about, yeah.
Otherwise, they couldn't fully understand. You know, they couldn't fully understand the plays, and I had to say, you forget that you're reading this on the page. Shakespeare was like the soap opera of his day.
Mm-hmm.
So he was having to build up scenes and make something happen, because otherwise the people on the ground in the globe, what were they called, the footlings or something?
Oh, I don't know.
The people who couldn't afford the seats and stood up, you know, they'd start throwing vegetables. Shakespeare was, Shakespeare was like panto.
I love it.
And the minute you tell them that, they start looking at Othello in a completely different way.
Absolutely. Context, as you said.
So if we think about that the context that we humans find ourselves in and put ourselves in and choose for ourselves, in as much as we can influence them, that's going to make the difference in what we turn into. So the beer, the yeast can turn into beer, or it can turn into bread.
Yeah. Depending on its potential.
Yeah. And that's depending on, isn't it, on the heat and the time and the how long.
And what it, you know, its substrate and what it's added into it. Yeah.
I love that you use the word substrate. That's so grown up.
Oh, well, thank you. First time I've been told I'm grown up for quite a long time, actually.
I always hear the posh people on YouTube talking about.
Oh, well, you know, you've obviously been watching my channel, darling. Yeah. No, I love that, the way you went into that, because there's so many similarities, analogies, you know, commonalities on that the bread will rise successfully when the yeast is healthy and when the conditions are right. You know, if you've got an old piece of yeast that's been stuck in the cupboard and dried out, it's not going to happen. And it's the same with the person. And the thing is that with the yeast, there we're talking connection, because without the connection to the sugar and the warmth and the water, it's not going to happen. And the same again with the person, that unless the connections are right. And the thing is, we are so much in control, inverted commas, we are of our own connections. We think we're not. We think that the world is dictating what we should be doing, and the world is dictating what we hear. But we've given up. We've sort of, I read a lovely quote that sort of said that if knowledge was the way forward to help mankind out of the hole it's in, you know, in relation to the world, we should have done it. But we haven't, because we have this massive disconnect. We think that having money and goods and winning the lottery will make our life well. But what it does is it's actually a wherewithal for us to disconnect even more, because we think that money will give us the big house, give us the private property. We can get all our food sent in, and we can just be this king of our little mansion and not have anything to do with the outside, because the money will give it. But that's when we die. That's when everything, all of our potential disappears, as far as I'm concerned, if you've got that mindset. I'm not saying, you know, you can use money to good. I'm not saying, you know, everybody's the same, but it's the mindset that's put into so many people, which forms this massive disconnect, that things will cure everything, when it isn't. We have to realize that we're part of this world. And that gets me onto the second point you made about the argument between the macro and the micro, if you like. But more and more now, it's coming, that the science is coming with showing, when you look at the micro, so the proton, and this is Nassim Haramein again, that he used, there's something called the Planck constant, which is the smallest electromagnetic frequency that they know exists. I mean, it's minute. I mean, times 10 to the minus 27 or smaller. And I mean, there's analogies to, I can't remember, you know, if the proton was the size of St. Paul's Cathedral, then the atom would be the size of the other side of the world or something. You know, there's massive things about space and how little stuff there is in everything. But it's a case of that now he's worked out, theoretically, he worked out the size of a proton, and his theoretical measurement was actually more accurate than where they've tried to actually measure it with machines, you know, with instrumentation, and it's been proven. And then he used that measurement and the Planck constant to work out the mass and the size of a black hole.
Wow.
Absolutely spot on. So I love you brought that up, because this is sort of new science, well, relatively new science, where the micro and the quantum is relating back up to the macro, and you can't get much bigger than a black hole.
No. And I mean, I almost imagine that the very word size, when it comes to black holes, is rendered meaningless.
Yeah, I have no idea. No idea.
But this also reminds me, you know, I'm always banging on about my lovely friend, the string theorist. And you and I have been talking a lot lately about vibrations. That sounds quite weird, doesn't it? You wouldn't want that taken out of context. Sounds a bit porny, doesn't it? Oh, look, my washing machine.
I'm picking up good ones, darling. I'm picking up good ones.
But this connects with your idea about the vibrations and, you know, the energy. And so his theoretical idea, which, as I understand it, he may never be able to prove. And it may be one of those theories that just remains a beautiful idea in and of itself. He can't test it in a lab. He can do the mathematics, but I think that only takes you so far. But what he posits is that what would connect the very big and the very small would be that if the universe were composed of vibrating strings, loops of string. And again, I mean, his book is so intense that I couldn't understand half of it, but as I understood it, there was something in the vibration of the lovely strings in the universe that connected and correlated and you know, all the C words with the way that musical instruments vibrate. So the pluck of a cello string, or the vibration, the note of a violin. And he actually gives, I don't know if he still does this, I haven't seen him for years, but he used to give these wonderful presentations where he'd talk about his physics. And he's also a pure mathematician. I mean, he's ridiculous, brain the size.
I was going to say.
But he'd give these presentations where he'd talk about the theoretical physics and he'd talk about the mathematics. And he would have a string quartet. And then they would play a little bit of I don't know, Mozart or something
Mm-hmm.
like that. Because for him, maths and music were
Go
the
together.
same thing.
Yeah.
And those vibrations were the same vibrations. So again, we're back to, you know, a kind of huge connection, because if his idea is right, that kind of unifies the universe.
Yeah.
Isn't it that thing that the physicists are all looking for? Is it called the unified field theory? The thing that will connect everything? Is that what they call it?
I'm not, yeah, it could well be. I know they call it's the unified field or the 0 point field, which is the field of energy that actually connects everything.
Right.
So it may be the theory of that field, I'm not sure. But you know, from the string theory, the vibration thing, that to me is just, whether it's through strings, you know, like he's, as you said, positing, which I think is such a beautiful word, about the strings connecting everything, or whether it's pure vibration of all individual parts, who knows? But for me, it's definitely it is about vibration, I'm afraid. Yes, we're back to that word again, because that everything that's the method of communication. That is the method of connection, is the vibration. Because we have no exterior, although we think we have hands that end there, they don't. It's just, that's a different vibration from the air and a different vibration from the table. And that's where we get the sort of the disconnect, that we can't be of the same, because we see it as different. You know, our perception is that we are separate, but we're not in any way at all. We are one with this field. This field is us, we are it. And so again, when we're talking about our place in this world, and whether, you know, like you were saying about the prose and the passion, and finding our place in this world, what we become, what we are, how we feel, is feeding that information out. That's connecting into the field. And then if you have someone standing next door to you, whether they like it or not, or whether they know it or not, they're actually picking up that vibration. Now, it may be in the sense that, you know, they're not aware, but they are. And that's why, you know, we've discussed this many times. When you walk in a room, you go, ooh, because you feel
That's exactly where I was about to go.
Yeah.
Exactly where I was about to go. And also that really bizarre fact, which is that you make up your mind about someone when you first meet them in the first 7 seconds. And that was always a really disconcerting thing for me, because I always relied on the ability to talk. So
Really?
I thought, if I can dazzle them with my brilliant conversation, then I'll be okay. But that was pointless, because 7 seconds. Now, as you know, when I think about that, I think, well, of course, you will revise your first impressions, and often our first impressions actually are a little bit wrong.
Skewed, yeah.
Mine often, but that's how long it takes. So 7 seconds, that is non-verbal, clearly.
Yeah.
Because when you're first introduced to someone, there's always a little pause.
Yeah.
So they might have said hello. Or they might have said how, because they're starting to say, how do you do? But that's all you've got.
Yes.
And something in you is saying, yeah, I'm going to like this person, or this person makes me feel a bit uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And that's what, you know, humans, we need to categorize things. And so we give things names. And the name that we tend to give to that is instinct, isn't it? It was my gut. It was my instinct. I just felt there was something. And if that's picking up a vibration of energy, of, you know, those little atoms stirring around, that would make perfect sense then, wouldn't it?
Totally. And I love it, again, you said about the 7 seconds, because I'd not heard that, but I totally, you know, understand that we can meet someone for the first time or speak literally half a sentence and you're in there, you go, oh, hello, even when you're not in person. Something about the way they speak, because I actually pick it up over emails, that there's the way someone writes an email, and there's something going on. I connect, I go, oh, hello, who's this, sort of thing. But I love it that we, you know, we can recalibrate, if you like, because for me, just what you said, is you meet someone for the first moment and you go, huh, or no, sort of thing. But then
It's quite black and white, isn't it?
Yeah, it can be, yes, or it can be a bit indifferent, sort of, okay, I'll reserve judgment in some ways. But that's a beautiful illustration of how the person, depending on what's gone on in their life, may come into a new situation with a defensive attitude. Because they need to protect themselves for whatever's reason, whatever's happened, no judgment. So we pick up on the defense that, oh, hello, that's a bit prickly. And like you said, it's then you might get into conversation, and with your dazzling conversation, it may then open the doorway that they'll go, oh, actually, you're safe to be around. So it's a case of they then change.
Oh, that's really interesting. I really love that, because one of the things I'm really conscious of doing as I get older is arranging myself in the field, so that I can make other people comfortable. And I learned this from working with horses.
Right.
So I'm not in that horrid, manipulative, how to make anyone fall in love with you in 10 seconds kind of a YouTube way. But in a way of, I want to put people at their ease. If they are carrying that defense like a shut down horse, I want them to feel comfortable enough to drop that. So when I'm standing talking to somebody, particularly standing, I'll do the thing that I'll do with my horses, which is I'll make sure that my body is open.
Yeah, right, yeah.
And I might, just very quickly do a little body, am I holding on to a bit of tension in that shoulder? I'll consciously
expand.
And be inviting. So yes, tell me your story. And I don't do that awful thing of mirroring the body language, which all the body language experts tell you must do. It's so powerful, the mirroring, because I find that is a bit manipulative. But I will suddenly notice if they're standing with one hip slightly cocked.
Yeah.
And I am too. And then, there's another little connection, there's another little congruence. But I never used to think of what I did with my body in conversation with people and meeting people, because I was so invested in my head, in what was coming out of my head. I had to be interesting, I had to be funny, I had to be charming, I had to be fascinating. It's quite tiring. No wonder I have all those disco naps.
I don't know about tiring, it'd be bloody impossible for us, because for me.
I was very tired in the 90s. Whereas now I'm much more, I still, obviously I don't want to be dull, but I'm much more interested in letting other people tell me their stories.
Yeah.
And the best thing you can do about that is actually slightly get out of your head, get into your physical self.
Right.
And open that physical self up, just like you would if you were standing in a field with a horse.
Yeah.
And you can definitely feel a few of the particles floating. I think that's the technical term.
Nothing like a little feel of the particles. And that, again, that's so lovely when you say, about opening up, because you are inviting in. And expansion is so powerful, because looking at the energetic level, we contract with all the negativity and the stuff that goes on. We contract because that is our defense mechanism. Go small, go tight, go full. Yeah, exactly.
Fetal position.
And then when we expand, we are opening ourselves to what is. And if our perception of what is of danger, we're not going to do it. It's all about up here, about how we perceive what's going on, is to what happens with our energy, with our emotions, with our neurology. It's all interconnected. So as you said, if you can meet somebody new and step into that lovely place of openness and active listening, where I think I'm guilty of, somebody tells you a story, yes, I can tell you an even better one than that, or I've got a comment to make on that. Oh, lordy. So active listening, I really, really do try and practice that now. Practice being the operative word.
Me too.
Because that's when it invites people and you make them feel safe, I think, because they realize you are listening to them.
God, there's so much here, and it's almost going to drive me mad because there's so many things that I want to
you want to say now.
But actually I want to just rewind a little bit, because I think what I'm about to say is connected to what we're talking about now. So there was a moment when you were talking about how important it is to be yourself, but you also, that was when you were talking about the disconnect, which is what I think of as when we lose ourselves, and we lose touch with ourselves. And I just wanted to talk a little bit more about that, because I think that the disconnection, what's pulled us contemporary human beings apart in some ways from each other, in some ways from ourselves. You and I have both talked a lot lately about how we see the increase of people kind of retreating into their sides, you know, the tribalism in politics feels like it's got a lot more, I was going to say stronger, but I think it's just a lot more angry. I mean, a lot more jagged, rather than we can disagree and let's have a chat about it. You know, you might have a different economic theory than me, but you know, we can all agree that humans are humans and we can still have a pint.
It's very personal, isn't it?
Very personal, and quite, I mean, as you said, in some ways quite defensive, and then the defensive turns into offensive.
Best form of defense.
Exactly. So there's that going on. And the other thing that I'm really conscious of, I wish I could remember these things, and I should write them down. It's like all my percentages, every percentage I will have said in this conversation will be wrong. So lovely listeners, go and look up the correct one. And I'm about to do another one of those, but there was something I heard the other day, and it was from a reputable news source. You know, it wasn't just some insane person shouting into the winds of the internet. And it said an extraordinary percentage of children, and again, I think it's in the 70 percentages. What would they call that? The 70th percentile. That's a proper way of saying it.
Oh, very posh.
Do not touch animals. You know, they haven't stroked a horse, they haven't touched a dog. No, I'll have got that completely wrong, but you know,
percentage wise, but there is an element of, you know, and I can understand that. Yeah,
I was really shocked, because I kind of think, you know, we're British, everyone's got a dog. Everyone knows a dog. And I ride around here and all you see are people walking their dogs, but that of course is confirmation bias, because I don't see
the people that don't have dogs. No,
because they're not
walking the dogs.
No.
Yes.
Yeah, who would thunk it? And because I have dogs and you have, you know, we love our dogs, so you kind of get into that thing of, God, everybody's got a dog. I mean, we're the home of the dog. We invented half the dogs. But then I suddenly started thinking about it. You know, if you're a busy working couple in a city, of course you don't have a dog. You can't have a dog. I mean, unless
you know, you haven't got a cat or a gerbil or a hamster either.
So it was the use of the word touch, you know, because we've all heard the thing about the children who don't know where milk comes from. And they genuinely think it comes out of a carton. Because they haven't seen a cow. And if they do see a cow, they don't know what the cow does.
No, don't know what it does.
And again, you and I, you know, live with coos, as we call them in Scotland. I grew up on a farm. You are a farmer. We've got coos and sheep all around here in my local fields, because the local farmer rents my landlord's fields. So we've got flocks and herds of everything. And they're very much part of my daily life. So again, it's quite hard for me to imagine not understanding what a cow is or does. And that was the first shocking one. But actually the thought of, growing up and never touching an animal. And that's our most basic form of connection, isn't it? Just the touch. Why is it that that picture on the Sistine Chapel speaks? So it's just two fat fingers touching each other.
Yeah.
But it echoes down the ages because it's that.
Yeah.
I mean, even as I'm doing that with my own fingers, I feel this little electric charge.
Yeah.
And as we know, the touch of animals is slightly different than the touch of humans. It's a different energy. You'd probably say it was a different vibration. It's certainly a different expectation.
Yes.
I always say the reason I think animals are so incredibly therapeutic is not because they give us love. It's because they can take all the love. You know, you don't go around stroking your husband, do you? You go, good boy, good boy. Oh, do you want a little scratch behind you? Little scratch behind you.
Oh my God, that was such a picture. That was such a picture you just conjured up for me. No, I don't do that actually.
And I would guess, and I don't want to make assumptions, but I would guess that you are not alone. But I think all of us are like those little kids who just want to hug everybody.
Yeah.
But you know, we've been socialized into thinking that's inappropriate, and maybe it is, I don't know.
No.
But you know, with the dogs, with the horses, you can rub them and you can scratch them and you can hug them and you could use their special voice and scratch them in their special places. So we can, all that love that's sitting in us that needs somewhere to go can go into the animals. And yeah, it's lovely that they love us back. But you know, I look at my horse, I'm not sure she loves me that much. She thinks I'm quite useful. Yeah. Because I do.
For the scratches, yes.
The scratches.
And the food. Thank you very much, Mummy. Yeah.
And you know, but essentially I sometimes think she kind of tolerates me. Because I'm a crazy human. And I ask her to do things that she wouldn't normally do in the world.
Oh, I love it. I love it. So, I think you're so onto something there. And I like the way you sort of use the sort of said about the animals being available for us to give our love to.
Yes.
And
they can take it.
Yeah, but that's such interesting words, because it makes you wonder then what's happening with humanity that other humans can't take it, which is where you're going. You know,
so sorry, my initial question, as you know, I can't ask a question without going off on 47 tangents.
That's our usual conversation.
But my question is, what is that disconnection? And I just want to add in one more thing which really struck me, is you said something I thought rather brilliant. You said we should be able to fix all our problems with all the knowledge in the world. And of course that was the hope of the Enlightenment. And I'm an old school small L liberal. So in other words, I believe in the Enlightenment with an absolute passion. All those, the flowering of ideas, the opening of minds, you know, the rejection of dogma, the asking of questions, the opening up to things which society at the time found quite shocking. You know, they were basically what the Enlightenment did, it blew the bloody doors off. Now, interestingly, there's a sort of weird thing where it's not loved so much by some people, which makes me a little bit sad. But I did think it would be the answer to everything. I thought humans with this much knowledge, with this much education, with a machine which has all the information in the world on it. Don't even have to go to the library anymore. It's just there. It's on the Google.
Yeah, but that's the problem, which is what it is, the disconnect.
Yes.
Because so you know what you were saying. So I've got into the bit about the Enlightenment. So the question before that was, why can't we do it? Why can't we?
Yeah, I mean, what is the disconnection?
Okay, so the disconnect for me, from my perception, is that we've become too insular. We've been taught through the Western world, through the information that comes through, that we can survive with our machine telling us exactly what to do, and with our own little biosphere, if you like, you know, that we'll keep ourselves to ourselves. And just as I said sort of earlier on, that if we've got enough money to create the environment that we want, that is our little separate environment, oh man, we're done. You know, enlightenment has happened. We've got every tool that you could ever want, every blooming app, every piece of software, everything. But the fact is, that is the massive disconnect, because it's taking away any acceptance, knowledge, perception of the fact you cannot be disconnected. You are part of this universe. You're part of the world. You're part of the biosphere. You're part of everything. We are part of it. And that disconnect is what is leading to the destruction, because it's always, we can take, and the earth doesn't matter. And I'm not sort of trying to go, oh, you know, greeny or whatever. They've got very good points to make, but it's the fact that there is a limited resource. It cannot be raped and pillaged ad infinitum, and then we expect sort of 20 years down the line, when everything's run out, what do we do? So I mean, that's one side of it, but the much more basic side of it for me is that we are part of that system, and what we do to the system we do to ourselves. And that's what's coming about, because we've thought, no, we'll just go, you know, take the trees down, do that, grow more corn, grow, you know, genetically modified because it's easier, do this, do that. And now we're reaping the rewards, which basically is, it won't sustain us, and it can't sustain us. And until we step into that place of realization that we have got to connect back to all of the systems, because we are part of those systems, nothing's going to change. So for me, the disconnect is the realization of a lot of modern people. They are part of that grass, they are part of that tree, they are part of that cow in the field, or the elephant, or whatever you want to say. We all play our part within this, and you cannot be separated out from it.
Okay, I think this is absolutely brilliant, because I'm suddenly realizing that it's not just the cutting down of the trees and the huge industrial arable agriculture
Wastelands,
and the, you know, because we need palm oil for some reason. I think it goes in fast food, doesn't it? So it's not even for a very good reason.
No.
In that it's not necessary. It's not necessary for our survival. That's very much a luxury item. But because of the palm oil, vast amounts of forest and woodland are being cut down and ruined. That you know, that's before you've even thought about things like oil spills or the plastic island floating around in the South Pacific. But as you were talking about this, and you said that's the disconnect, in that we are part of this system, and we as mammals are wrecking this system. I suddenly thought it's also to do with the species. So one of the things that's really upset me, and I'm not in any way a naturalist, you know, I occasionally watch a David Attenborough program, and I love him, and I grew up watching him. But I don't know very much about nature. I don't have all the books. I haven't read them. But I'm really, really upset about the white rhino. Bizarrely upset. I've never seen one. I've never been to a country where they are indigenous, and yet they have been. They've basically gone extinct now, haven't they?
Yes, I know there are some, you know, where there might be one male still roaming around, which is the saddest thing you can think of.
And it's not even that the white rhino is the most beautiful animal in the world. It doesn't have the grace of a cheetah or the sort of miraculousness of the hummingbird. It's a big old wrinkly unit. But I would look at these pictures, and of course the rhinos would always be missing their horns. So there's another disconnection.
Literally, a
literal visual manifestation of something that has been torn away. And there was something about them that just, I don't know, touched me in some. There was a sort of incredibly dignified resignation. Now, I know that's pure anthropomorphism, but that's what it felt like. And the thing that really made me incredibly sad is it was also unnecessary, because they were poached for their horns, which, as we know, are used in medicine, which has absolutely no proof of its efficacy. And I think, I may be wrong about this, but I think rhino horn is used to help men get erections. Is that?
I think it is in that line of work. Yes.
Yeah, in that line of work, and a very honourable line of work it is.
We wouldn't be here without it. Oh no, who said that? Right, carry on.
But you know, there are other ways, and we as a species have hunted to death another species for, let's face it, no reason, no good reason. And so, you know, if we think about the bigger system, which is starting to get out of harmony with itself because of the, you know, the way that we're changing it by deforestation and all that kind of stuff. But then you take the specifics, which is that magnificent animal isn't there anymore. There's an elephant somewhere, can't remember which one, but there is a type of elephant which is on the verge of going extinct. As we know, you know, there are coral reefs that are dying. Now, all this to me, like I say, because I'm not an expert in these things, it's quite distant. I'll see an article, I'll see a sudden photograph of that rhino, the last white rhino. And I'll feel something very profound, but it's not like I'm following it every day. But what strikes me is how profound the feeling is when it, you know, this is not my passion, this is not my thing. I mean, I think it's because I can't really bear it. So I do slightly keep it at a distance, because if I look too closely at what's happening to this earth, I would despair. I think I would. So I'm having to, you know, here's a disconnect within the disconnect. I'm having to disconnect myself on purpose as a protection mechanism.
To stop feeling.
Yes, because otherwise I fear I would be overwhelmed by the sadness. Because also, you know, there's we can't stop it. We can all do our little bits. And I always say, you know, choose your patch and do
work
the good
hard
you
there.
do there for all your worth. But that's all we have as individuals. We have our little patch. And so that sense of powerlessness comes. And I think, I mean, I don't know whether this is good or bad, but I sense, you know, for my own protection, I can't look at it too much, because I would just be, you know, I'd be crying all the time.
I think, oh God, you raised such a brilliant and difficult subject there, because on the one hand, I totally get that, you know, I've been there, done that. You know, I don't watch some of the wildlife programs, not because they're necessarily about the endangered species, but you always know someone's going to get eaten along the way. And for me, I just think, okay, I know it happens. I know that there's the balance. I don't actually have to watch it, you know, my choice. But when we come to the moment of despairing about what's going on and the effect it has on us, on the one side, that is, if you'd like, you know, perfect, because it shows you're feeling, it shows you care. But if we form a disconnect from that because we don't want to feel the pain, and this is where your favorite expression of, Kathy, I need to process an emotion, can come in.
Yes. Well, how do I process this one?
Exactly.
Actually?
Yeah, I mean, this is the discussion. For me, it's to use that as an awareness. Okay, so you don't deny it's happening. You don't say nothing to do with me, because it is, we're part of the system. But I think my feeling is, if we allow it to overwhelm us, we can do no good by being there and sort of blocking it off, because then we are disconnected from that. And, you know, in the perfect scenario, we allow ourselves to be connected to everything. But what we do is work on how all of the different inputs, our perception of all the different inputs, how we process it, how we allow it to affect our energy, if you like. So absolutely aware of, like you said, maybe one white rhino left. What use is that? We've caused it. You know, not you or me personally, but humanity, and we're part of humanity, has done this. It's something that's happened. We don't want to happen again. But if we shut it off from our input, we are becoming insular again. We're putting a wall up. You know, we're like the rich people that I don't want to know what's going on in Shantytown. I'm putting my wall up and I'm living okay. But at the same time, it's such a difficult one, because I love the way you said that we keep within our own patch. And I totally think that's true, that we can't go shouting at this and shouting at that. It's not going to do anything. We have to work within our own power, within our own infrastructure, if you like, around us. So like for you, it's writing, and the power of your words and your passion behind your words. That's who you are. For me, it's the energy and connection and doing the energy work, you know. That's my part. And all I can think is that if we can keep within our own parameters, in the sense that we put all of our heart and soul into our passion, which is our strength, and which is our positive energy, that goes out. And the reason I say that is that there are scientific studies out there showing there's these random number generators, which are placed all over the world, and they're run by the global, GCI, Global Coherence Initiative, okay? And the idea being that when the world there's no major emotional thing happening in the world, these random number generators are generating ones and noughts completely randomly, as the name suggests. So they just do the ones and noughts. But they've shown that when there's a massive change in the emotion, such as the death of Diana, the tsunami, the Twin Towers, these random number generators actually start producing more ordered results, okay? They're not random. So the only thing that has changed in the world is the emotion. And that has affected the energy of the atmosphere, the energy of the biosphere that we live in. So for me, it's not a major step forward to say that if enough people got into a positive frame of mind, a positive outlook, a positive aspect on any subject, you can make a difference. And Lynn McTaggart actually does this. She's got something called the intention experiment, which she's been running for, I think, since the 90s, middle 90s maybe. And there she gets people together online. And to begin with, it was with a small, inverted commas, intention that somebody would be ill. And you know, my father-in-law's ill, he's got cancer. So for 10 minutes on a Sunday afternoon, people from all around the world, if they chose to join in, would send positive intentions to that person. She then wanted to try and see if this would actually make a difference in the world. You know, her theory being, if enough people got together. So she wanted to find some statistics, my favorite word not to say, that actually she could measure something. So she looked at, say, gun crime in New York or anything like that. Nobody would give her any info. It was all, you know, classified. No, you can't have it, because they kept wondering, what do you want it for? And it ended up that somebody she found had done some studies in Indonesia, in the north of the country, when the Tamil Tigers were fighting the government forces. And I think it had been going on for about 25 years. And the guy who took the collected the data had been studying it for 2 years, and he'd been looking at death rate and injury rate. So he had a set of data for 2 years. And from that, they could correlate what they expected to happen, you know, for the next 2-3 months. So Lynn McTaggart got together an intention experiment with the idea of, I can't remember the exact wording, but it was like to stop the fighting in the Northern Territories. And she put it out online, and she didn't really publicize it much because she wasn't sure, and she didn't know what reaction she'd get, because she's like meddling, if you like, in foreign politics and goodness knows what. but a lot of people found out about it. So she ended up having a lot of people joining in. And there's like a 20-minute warm up, if you like. Then there's 10 minutes, 20 minutes of actual intention, and then 20 minutes cool down. And what they found was actually there was a slight rise in killings and injuries straight after it happened. But what was, they did the intention experiment, but what was happening there was the government forces were carrying out more little battles and winning. So they were sort of making ingress into the actual situation. And then there was a massive drop off. And in fact, peace was reached very soon afterwards. So the drop off was not expected. It's one experiment. Can you say it's definitive? No, but there is something behind that. But even more than that, when she got in touch with the GCI about these the monitors, they changed for the 10 minutes while that intention experiment was being run. So for me, it's something we should be taking note of, that if enough people sit in an intention, a positive intention, you can change things.
This is so interesting to me because you step so easily into those ideas. You're very at home in those ideas. You swim in those ideas. And I, as you know, there's a part of me that suddenly goes, whoa, hold on. We're going to change, deep-rooted civil war with intention from the other side of the world. And there's a part of me that just goes, no, too far, too woo,
one
too
step
woo,
too far.
too many woos, can't. But the thing is, it's not. I have absolutely no basis on which to say, well, that can't be true because this, and this, and this. I mean, the experiment has been done. But there's something in me which shuts, and we were talking about expansion and contraction.
Yeah.
So clearly there's something in me is scared shitless of that idea. But I should be delighted by it.
But why?
Because it's all the things I like about everybody being connected.
But what scares you?
I've no idea, because I'm just feeling it now as you're talking about it, and it's really easy. It's really interesting because the way you talk about it is so easy. I think let's dig into this because this could be revealing. Let's hope so. I think it's because there is such a long history of charlatans and charlatanism.
Yeah.
And people coming along and saying, I have the answer to everything. And you see it in cults, you see it.
Yeah.
I even see it now in certain areas of self-help and wellness. I see it in writing, actually, because as you know, I teach writing now. And so I go and have a look and see what other people are doing. A lot of them there's a thing at the moment, they're promising that you can write your book in a weekend. Yeah. So that's a very long way from someone running an experiment to see if collective intention can reduce violence between humans. But for me, it's a continuum, I think. I think that's what's happening. So I think the charlatans who are promising these people that they can write their book in a weekend if they pay $499 are setting those people up for disappointment and failure and cheating them and promising them something that they can't deliver on. And that must be one of my core beliefs, because it really makes me angry.
Yeah.
I really feel for those people who are being
taken, get sucked into it. Yeah.
Even though I will never know those people,
but it's the principle behind it.
Yeah.
Especially in your field, where you know what you're talking about.
So when I hear about things which sound fantastic in the old-fashioned sense,
yes,
I think there is a part of me that goes, whoa, hold on. Is this a really wonderful, useful sort of shades of the Enlightenment idea, or is this a charlatan offering us hope only
There
to
is.
shatter that hope.
But I think the difference, and I totally hear you, hon, because yeah, we know what's out there, and that's where I try to be really careful in what I offer, to say it's nothing to do with me, in the sense that I'm not going out there as this big wondrous person that can do this, that, and the other. I know nothing.
Yeah, you don't make the promises. You don't say, I
No,
can
I know,
change
but
your life in 48
that's why
hours.
I'm very careful not to. But the difference, I think, between what I hear when you were speaking then was the person as to the collective, because nobody can make this change happen. The if, and I say if because I have not seen the scientific data and I've only seen this one experiment, I do not know, okay? So I'm not jumping, oh, look, that's definitely the case. But for me, from my understanding of the energetic side of the environment of the world we live in, it's almost the same as, it's like black, oh yeah, of course it can bloody work. But I totally understand what you're saying, but maybe a way of looking at it is that there's no one person saying this can happen.
Yeah.
They are giving the idea, and it's only if a collective of like-minded people got together, connected to themselves, connected across the world, there may be a glimmer of hope of it happening. And okay, Lynn McTaggart chose that because she wanted to do good. And she also needed something that might have some statistics that she could actually use to show. But even she, when you read the write-up of the experiment, is highly, okay, this is what happened. I'm not going to say, this is this. And she's not jumping on the bandwagon as the guru who's found the answer. But it's the difference between the one and the many, because it cannot happen without the many. And it's not about you're achieving something for yourself. You're helping somebody else as well. So it's not as though it's promising you fame and fortune and money and you've written your book in a weekend. It's saying, if we all stepped into a different energy with a good intention, this might be able to happen.
Actually, hold on a second.
I'm holding.
I was about to say what I think my second fear is.
Oh, yeah.
Which is, and this is me being very raw, and probably because, we're in a pandemic and life feels a little bit turbulent, shall we say. What I was going to say is that there's a part of me that's angry at the collective, even though I believe in the collective. I am, in terms of politics, I definitely veer towards the collectivist rather than the individualist. I think we need society. I love the Scandi model. But I think there's a wounded part of me that's furious with the bloody collective, because how did it let that 25-year-old conflict start? How did it let Northern Ireland happen? Why didn't it stand up and said, look, this, segregation and slavery are just wrong. Where was the collective then? What was it, just at home?
But you've got to remember that the whole of, from, again, my perspective, and you know far more about politics than me, but from my perspective, the whole of the last, I don't know what, 500, 600 years, whatever, has been about separation, has been about putting everybody in their box. That the collective does not actually bloody exist. That you're broken down, you're made to feel, and you're encouraged to go into your separate box. You're encouraged to make your own money, put your own walls up, and live your safe little life. Don't worry about what's going on over there. So for me, I totally understand what you're saying, but the collective doesn't exist. It's only in certain Aboriginal tribes, who to me are the most advanced of all of us, because if everything, I read a report the other day that said that if the solar flares, the solar storms got really bad, which they could do, all internet access across the Atlantic, they've got big cables, would stop. And you can imagine what that would do. But for the little Malayan people of the Sungai people in Malaysia, they would just carry on their little way and nothing would change. And so for me, they are the most advanced at this precise moment in time, because they don't have a need of what is being pushed at us all of the time. And yes, here we are using it. I totally accept the sort of double standards there. But they are the collective. They have a group consciousness that what is good for one is good for all. and they won't let one person go hungry. They'll share. That's part of their culture. Whereas we've been taught over hundreds of years now, as you said, divide and conquer, divide and rule.
But also, yes, because I mean that's the traditionally, until very recently in history, countries were ruled by either an individual, you know, an emperor,
king, queen, whatever,
a king or a queen, or a very small cabal, so a theocracy, or you know, a small group of elite individuals at the very, very, very top of the pyramid. Now, the collective is much, much bigger than that one person or that one tiny group.
Yeah.
So we got to find a way to render the power of the collective null. And, you know, there is the cynical people say, well, the reason that the kings and the queens and the politicians did as they gave the collective somebody else to hate. They look, I'm not your enemy. Look over there, those people are your enemy. And quite often they're of a different sex than you, or they're a different color,
religion, or
they have different pigmentation than you. They worship a different god than you. They might worship the same god, but the slight transubstantiation
gets in the way.
And so then, because you've installed the fear of the other, and talk about disconnection, you know, as the clever politician, as the clever ruler, you are getting your potential collective to worry much more about the Catholic next door, or about, you know, somebody whose skin color is different, which was, you know, we were all the same color 5 minutes ago in evolutionary terms. So I find that one particularly distressing. They're all distressing. But so it, you know, you can argue that it has been a powerful and a conscious tool of domination. But then what I was going to say, because I wanted to get onto the positive, because these are all quite negatives, and obviously, you know, we have to look the negative in its eye. We are not those positive Pollyannas. It's just
the shiny worlds.
If you just say it's all shiny, it will be all shiny. But actually, you can see something of how the collective works if you just look at different societies around the world. So say, and I have to talk about the ones I know best, but say you look at America, which is quite famously atomized, because it was very much built on the idea of the individual. The individual is really admired. The American culture didn't really love the collective. And now you'll hear American commentators, when they talk about that, it's very much, it's a European thing. And they don't say European in a good way. You know?
Really?
So it's, you know, winning and the individual winning. And I think so Britain is always halfway, isn't it, between the European culture and the American culture. But much more over here, there is the idea of the group, there is the idea of the team. Also, we love losers. So that's you know, there isn't that thing of the individual conquering everything and winning everything. We think that's a bit vulgar and winning stuff on your own.
Oh, I love it.
I mean, we love Dunkirk and Eddie the Eagle. So, and that says a lot about our culture, I think. But then you move on to particularly the Northern European societies. And I know that one has to make a caveat because they're very small countries. So it's easier to have a social contract. It's easier to have cohesion. It's easier to have connection if there's only, I don't know what it is, 8 million of you. But if you do look at Sweden, Finland, Norway, Denmark, they're not without their problems. And I often get told on Facebook by people who are natives of those countries, I'm like, my spectacles are a little bit rose tinted. Because I do love this. I love the idea that in Finland teachers are regarded as kings and queens, and they're like rock stars.
Different
and
perception.
They're compensated accordingly, because for the Finns, education is so important. They don't pay lip service to it. They treat their teachers well, and they reward their teachers, and the teachers have a social status. That this is, as I understand it, I'm often wrong about these things. I always have to add that caveat. But so if we're talking about the power of the collective and the power of the intention of the collective, which a part of me is going, whoa, that's a bit, woo, it's a bit unproven, it's a bit, I don't know what. Well, I don't know what it touches in me, but something a bit strange. But then immediately my empirical brain kicks in, and it goes, well, look at the difference in societally, culturally, in terms of values and meaning between those Northern European countries, which very much are about a collective and which do have a very strong intention, which is the group matters. We matter as a group. They've got that idea, and I know there are problems in all those countries, and they're not perfect societies. But in terms of liberal democracies, on all the measures of well-being, they always come up top every single time. And then you look at America, which is an incredible country, and I love it, and I only ever criticize it as I criticize an old friend or myself. If I didn't love it, I wouldn't bother seeing its flaws. I mean, it gave us jazz, it gave us F. Scott Fitzgerald, it gave us the movies. Although the French would argue that they got there first, and it's got all this incredible sort of talk about passion and enthusiasm, but it is a very atomized society, and on those well-being metrics, I believe it scores really weirdly low for a country which is the richest and most powerful nation that history has ever seen. And it seems to me that often, the Americans are unbelievably enterprising as a culture. That's very important culture, enterprise. They're incredibly intelligent. They've given us more Nobel Prizes than the next 10 countries put together. So why can't they meet the Scandi standard on,
But you see, I think you just said two words there, which may have a sort of a bearing on it. They are the richest and most powerful.
And those don't make you happy.
No, exactly. I think that's the that proves the argument, if you like, that things and knowledge are not the way to connection.
This is brilliant. We've come all the way back.
We have.
We've
done a good job. No, but it's I think that's in your face there, because as you said, that the American culture is about the individual rising, achieving.
John Doe can become the president.
Exactly. And being the person they need to be, which is absolutely wonderful. If it's the thing that's coming from the passion within and also realizes there are other people around as well. But when it's the you shall rise and bugger everybody else, you get the disconnect yet again. And they may be powerful and they may be rich, but it doesn't cut it.
Well, and also then we might have a expectation gap. So because, as you say, over the last, what would you say, 100 years, we, and in, let's say for the sake of convenience, Western culture, industrialized culture, have been taught that, exactly as you say, if we have more money and we have more power and we have more stuff, we'll be happy. And then later on came the idea of fame. So that's
the last one.
And so the expectation was raised. If I get these things, everything will be
I'll be happy.
And then, like the lottery winners, you get those things, And actually they've done really interesting longitudinal studies on lottery winners, and some clever sociologists said, whoa, aye, there's a lovely yeah. And I know that she said it just like that.
Yeah, I believe she did.
But it's the most perfect group to study.
Yeah, to see what wealth does. Yeah,
there's a control group. It's it's all perfect. And what they found was the classic effect of the hedonic treadmill, which is the idea that we humans adjust quite quickly to the very good or the very bad. So there was a level of that. So in other words, with most of them, their happiness and well-being went shooting up.
Yeah.
And then over, I think it was a period of about 6 months, not that long.
Oh, really? Only 6 months, yeah.
Down, and then it would come back pretty much to the baseline.
Where it was before.
If they'd really been struggling with money before they won the lottery, they would be above their baseline, but not by much. And there were certainly some instances in this research I saw, and as usual, I have no memory of who did it or where I read about it.
But it's out there on the interweb, so if anyone wants to go and look for it.
Get on the Google. But as I recall, and this makes perfect sense to me, with some of them, they were slightly less happy than they'd been before, because, cousin Bernie suddenly appeared out of the woodwork, and an old Aunt Maud who hadn't talked to you for 20 years, and now suddenly you're rich.
Yeah.
She's all over you. And obviously this didn't happen with every family, but it certainly did happen. And then you're left with the feeling, and this is why fame doesn't work, you're left with the feeling, well, they only love me for my money.
Yeah. I know. Yeah.
So if we've got the raised expectation, power, money, fame, riches, I said money and riches, they're the same thing, sorry about that. That's going to fix everything. And then of course it doesn't. And it doesn't make you feel fabulous. You're then going to have much more of a disappointment than if you weren't offered the promises in the first place.
And the other thing is that if you say won the lottery, as you said, go through the cycle and come back down to where you were before or lower, where are you left? What have you got left to look for? If the money doesn't do it, which is what we've been plugged, chucked at us all the time. You need more money, you need more things, you need money to buy this thing so that this will make your life better, and you need to buy this because this will make your life better. And John Smith down the road has got that already, so you better go and get it because he's doing better than you. It's all, every advert is about, oh, you can't survive unless you've got this.
Yes.
So somebody with that money could go out and buy everything they wanted, and then 6 months, a year later, 2 years later, they're back to where they were. What have they got to look for then?
Well, also what this makes me think of, I completely agree with you. So it's not, they tried the thing, it didn't work. And then where did they go?
Yeah. Where are they left then?
But what also it makes me wonder is all this stuff that we've been talking about, this is not rocket science. It's incredibly well documented. All the thoughtful books about how to live the good life will say a version of this. There are studies, there are, if you need a graph, there's a graph. And I also think that somewhere deep down, instinctively, intuitively, we humans kind of know that those things aren't going to work.
I'm going to do it, yeah.
And yet, as a group, we are more likely to go on chasing those things than not. Getting rich and famous is still a dream, even though, look, the data's in.
Yes.
We've seen the rich and famous, and
it
most
don't work.
of them, okay, I'll give you, the reason that being rich and famous is awful is because you can list on one hand the people who actually look happy in it. And I would say they are Tom Hanks, Helen Mirren, Pierce Brosnan, he always looks very jolly.
Oh yeah, with his lovely wife,
his lovely wife, and lovely Hugh Jackman, who just
again with his lovely wife,
and I actually think George Clooney with his lovely wife, he always looks like he's enjoying it quite a lot. But pretty much everyone else, it's divorce, it's drugs, it's rehab, it's, I don't know, something terrible is going on with their father. They've been captured by some religious cults. They, you know, I mean, my God, they're overdosing. This is, and again, you know, it'd be really interesting to compare the percentages with the majority of the population, because we could be having massive confirmation bias here.
Yes, yeah, because it's what we see. Yeah,
Yeah,
we pick up. Yeah,
read about Philip Seymour Hoffman, who just seemed like such a lovely man. And
again, completely over my head.
oh, he's you'd recognize him instantly.
She says.
Yeah, you would. He's an incredibly good actor, but he's one of those really good actors. Came out of the theatre, that was his love. But he would also suddenly pop up in a Mission Impossible film.
Oh, right, okay.
So, you know, he wasn't snobby about doing a blockbuster, but he'd do that blockbuster like he was doing Shakespeare. And but then he'd appear in a little sort of wonderful, quite eccentric indie film. He was just a lovely actor, and he lived in New York, and he was the actors, and people really admired him. And he just seemed, from all his interviews and everything people said about him, like a really, really nice man.
Mm.
And he'd had a trouble with heroin when he was a younger man. And it seemed like he'd licked it.
Yeah.
And you thought, that's so lovely for the world, because we get to have Philip Seymour Hoffman with us for a bit. And he wasn't even particularly rich or particularly famous. You know, as you say, you don't know his name, but
yeah,
but you know, compared to the majority of the population, yes, he was. And something was, I don't know, lost in him, wounded in him, and he suddenly just went back to taking
the
drugs. And I always, you can't say this about people you've never met, but people wrote lots of really thoughtful articles about it, you know, people who'd spent time with him in his last months. And the sense you got is that he was somebody who was too sensitive for the world. So he was desperately trying to medicate. And heroin it's a comfort drug. I mean, it sounds weird because it's such an ugly drug, because it's a killer drug. But I remember talking to somebody who'd been quite a severe heroin addict, and he said it's just like someone comes and wraps you in a warm blanket.
Yeah, so that's the way to go.
Yeah. So
that's an interesting thing, because the other thing I find really interesting, okay, the one thing we know in life is we're going to die. Okay, that's the one thing we know. Yes. And we can look to death as it's a black hole, it's the end, nada, nothing after that. And so you have people who live their life to the fullest because they think there's nothing at the end, or you have people sometimes who go through life really depressed because, well, when we get there, that's the end of it. What's the point, sort of thing.
Yeah.
And I always, my mindset, rightly or wrongly, is that after death, that's the easy part. This is the hard part, because I believe we're energy, and we come into a physicality to learn lessons, and it's actually to inform the universe. That's my own thoughts. I'm not trying to convince anybody about anything. But the fact is that we have a choice of whether we look forward happily, whatever the outcome we think might happen, or we stay in a depressed state of, oh my god, what's going to happen. And I'm not talking about people that are suffering from clinical depression and things like that, but people who have the ability to make the choice of an outlook during the day of, is it going to be a good day or is it going to be a bad day? And I know that Joe Dispenza, his book Becoming Supernatural, this is what it's all about, that our tomorrow is our yesterday, because we're going to repeat the pattern over and over. We're going back to the work where somebody might be a bit of a drain on us, and so as soon as we get up in the morning, oh god, we've got to go to work. And so we've created that day before we've even got out of bed, basically.
Yes
Because that's our expectation. And I mean, that's a whole nother story. But when you were saying about the actor who went back into heroin because it got too much, that's the moment of that choice. And obviously if somebody's addicted, it's a different matter, and I'm not belittling anything like that, but every day we have a choice of how we look at the world. how we get out of bed, how we perceive the day, that even if there is hard work to do, you know, I've been livestock farmer, we're retired now, and there were some days I did not want to get out of bed when there was a forsaken pouring with rain and we were in the middle of lambing. It was, oh, do I have to? But it's trying to engender in people, I don't know if that's the right word, a more positive outlook, a way of bringing that forward, that positivity, not to go about, like you said, everything shiny on Instagram.
Yeah.
But actually, every time we take a step, go, actually, my legs are working. That's a good one. Okay, you know, I can feel the rain on my head. It's wet and it's cold, but I can actually feel it. I'm here to do it.
Yeah, so
Being
I'm
present.
alive, and also the grass is going to grow, because
exactly. Exactly. Let's look at the positives. So I'm not trying to sort of berate everyone. You all got to think positive, but it's a way of maybe helping to change your passage through life.
I completely agree. Could I also just explain, I've got flies in this.
Oh, I know, I can see, and I've got them as well. In fact, I think it's the same one that's coming from me and going into your camera.
Because I was just slightly aware I'm occasionally doing this rather effete hand gesture, and I didn't want you to think I was just flipping away your ideas.
Well, of course, I've taken immense umbrage.
Yeah, I've got 3 flies, and
oh, I only have one.
I know we're all connected, and I'm probably, you know, 87% related to them by DNA, but I just do wish they'd bugger off. Yeah, what I was going to say, which was, it was going to be good. What was it?
Looking on the bright side of life.
Yes. Here's something that I think I'm guilty of. And I think it's because, I believe that if I know something, everyone else knows it. That's the kind of thing that babies have, you know, but before babies understand that, although yes, we're part of the field, and they are part of the field, and then they understand, they have to learn that they are actually separate beings.
Yes, yeah.
Very little infants, they don't believe there's any difference between them and their mum.
No, and they don't know that hand is theirs and things like that.
Yes, exactly. I mean, it's really hard to get your head around, actually, start thinking about it. And also, when I say they don't know, how do we know they don't know?
No, exactly, yes.
Somebody's obviously done some very clever observations and studies and stuff.
And made that, conclusion.
And of course, when you watch the way that tiny children behave, it makes perfect sense. But I think part of my weakness is I tend to think, because, like I say, because I know something, everybody knows it. I'm still like that little tiny kid who thinks she's the same as everybody and part of everything. I completely agree with you about the power of choice. I think the power of choice is everything. So when we wake up in that morning, you might get that first unbidden, almost rising from sleep, rising from the subconscious instinct that today is going to be a crappy day. Or I don't want to get out of bed. And then, because we are self-conscious creatures, we are conscious creatures, unlike, you know, our horses and our dogs, we can think about ourselves thinking about ourselves.
Yeah.
We can then make a choice because we are aware. So we know that, oh God, the story I'm telling myself for whatever reason is today's going to be a crappy day. And I might say to myself something like, is that useful? You always say that to me. Is that useful? I think, well, no. So then I have a choice. If for whatever reason I need to sit in the crappiness, because I don't know, some crappiness in me needs to be honored or marked or acknowledged or just felt, then I can do that. Or I can say, actually, hold on, this is making me feel horrible. It's doing me no good. It's not useful. So let's see if I can shrug that crappiness off. And I'll do that in 100 different ways. I'll ring up you and shout at you down the telephone. I'll dance and stomp. I'll put on very loud music. You know, I'll say, is the crappiness just actually living in my shoulders? So maybe, as you know, I sometimes need to stick my bottom in
Up
the
in the
air.
air, much to the builder's delight.
Much to the builder's delight. They love it when I do that. But that's my choice. Now, I know I don't always execute the choice. I don't always do it well, but it's something that I will do increasingly automatically, because I know that most of my emotions come from thoughts, and I know that I can choose my thoughts. And
Your
this
perception,
is the thing.
yeah.
Yeah, so you and I talk about this all the time. You change the way you think about the thing changes.
Yeah.
And if we had another hour and a half, I would tell you a horse story to illustrate that. But luckily, I get the sense we've been talking for a really long time and people may be losing the will to live. But I'm just going to stick to this point because I think it's really important, is there can be a certain impatience when you look at people. You said the people who are capable of making the choice.
Yeah.
So obviously, we're not talking about the people with the brains wired
Chemistry,
up.
yeah.
So I have a friend who's bipolar. That is no more a sense of this, to do with the stories she tells herself or the choices she makes, or her brain is wired up in a way,
in a different manner, yeah.
So that's a different thing. But like you say, in cases of, I don't know, anxiety or mild to moderate depression, or just the, what was it Thoreau called the lives of quiet desperation. He said most human beings live lives of quiet desperation. And I remember I had a friend, I repeated this rather grandly when I was at university, and my friend Sophie, who was in my college, turned around to me and she went, "Tan, you and I live lives of noisy despair."
None of the quiet about you.
Quiet desperation.
I love it.
But those people, which is probably the majority of the population, isn't it? We're all prone to our melancholies, our low-level depressions, our anxieties. These are not brain wiring. This is not like being born with cystic fibrosis. This is to do with the choice of your thoughts, the quality of your thoughts, the stories you tell yourself, the context you put yourself in. I'm going to take a bet that a huge amount of those people don't know that they have a choice.
Yeah.
Because it feels like the mood is coming at them.
Yeah.
And actually, there's still a part of me that finds it counterintuitive, because it does feel sometimes like the world's sorrow is coming at me. And I think, no, it's coming from within me, because it's being generated by the thoughts I choose to give meaning to, the stories I tell myself, and the emphasis I put on, and the value I put on. And I can change those.
You can change those. But I do believe, like you said, though, it is coming at you, because every time you switch the TV on and read the newspaper, all you have is bad news. I still struggle. I've struggled for so many years as to why is the news not good? Why?
You remember Martin Lewis said that and everyone laughed at him. He was quite a famous ITV newscaster. And he said, "We need more good news." And it went, "Ha ha ha, your career is over."
Exactly. And I mean,
I think it was too. I think that was the end of him.
The undercurrent is to keep people in fear, and you can control them.
Also, you can tell them stuff.
Well, exactly. They're open to suggestion.
Yeah.
So but
we do
honey,
sound like two mad old anti-capitalist hippies.
But I think that's a good place that maybe we can start wrapping it up. As you said, these poor listeners, if they're still with us now, I hope they've got a glass of gin in hand. I think we've covered quite a bit there about the different aspects of connection, the different aspects of disconnection. Yeah. And what they look like.
I mean, I'd like to talk more about this stuff because I think it's really interesting. I also, just on a personal note, I'm really pleased that you and I didn't have a disconnection, because it's a slightly different quality just talking to each other on the telephone and talking to each other in a way that we hope we might give something to complete strangers across the other side of the world. I mean, obviously we swear a lot less on this, don't we?
Just a bit.
I think I only said shit once. And
you said it now as well, so that's all right.
Yeah. But my fear always when you're doing something like this is that awareness that I'm not just shouting at you down the telephone in an orgy of self-indulgence. You know what? We are trying to offer something, in these conversations for people to listen to.
I tell you what we're trying to do. We're trying to connect.
We're trying to connect. But my worry was that then a self-consciousness would creep in and there would be a slight disconnection between you and me, and that hasn't happened.
It hasn't happened, has it? It's just as if we're speaking on the phone, but we can actually see each other.
Yeah. Just a little bit less shouting, a little bit less sweary.
Yeah.
And that's not, that's
okay. We'll just turn the dial down a little bit.
Anyway, so I've really enjoyed it. Thank you.
So have I. And just thank you, honey. I mean, it's always a joy talking to you. Absolutely. So we'll call this the end of our first conversation.
Brilliant.
And we'll see what happens on the next one. So everybody out there, thank you for being here. And I'll put all our links up in the bump. So if you want to find either of us, you can. If you want to switch us off, you can.
Choice. Power of choice.
Power of choice, indeed. But yes, just sending lots of love to everybody.
Oh, it was brilliant. Lots of love to everybody.
Bye.